Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. On this episode I'm joined by Kristen. Some of you might know her as the Paranorm Girl Podcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a chilled, laid-back episode because there's lots to talk about. I'm a bit of a fan of Kristen's podcast, so without further ado, let's get Kristen in. Hello Kristen.
Hello Reeves. How's it going?
It's going all right. So you're back. I haven't talked to you actually... God, it's got to be since, when was it? Last time you were on, was it the summer?
It was. It's been a good amount of time, maybe like 5-6 months or so.
We did a live stream, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, we did do the live stream as well. Yeah, I was thinking about the first time we recorded together on your show. But yeah, we did that live stream. That was a lot of fun.
Well, actually, when we did the first one, that was nearly a year ago, I think.
Oh my gosh, my brain.
So that was... because Paratalk version 2, nearly a year old, I think. Anyway, so so you've been quite busy because I know that you've been putting out a lot of content. So I thought I want to get you back on an episode and kind of pick your brains because you've really kind of diversified. You're doing a lot of different stuff lately. I mean, you've been quite busy, haven't you?
Yeah, you could say that. I feel like I've come out from under a heavy blanket of just chaos and nonstop doing. October, as you might know, being a paranormal podcast yourself, October is a busy time for us. Very, very busy. And, that was by design. I knew going in it was going to be crazy, nonstop madness, but, it was like 2 episodes a week, which was really eye-opening, and tons of guests. I've got some really outstanding guests coming on the show now. And of course, carrying on with the subject for the season, psychics and mediums and all of that. It's just kind of, it seems like there's something new every day to tackle.
So for those new listeners to Paratalk, now you do something a little bit different with your episodes. You don't just do an episode. You do kind of a mini series of one thing, and you do multiple episodes, don't you? You still doing that? Is that still your kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm kind of carrying on with that, carrying the torch for that. I don't see a lot of other podcasts that do it like that. I like to think of it as binge-worthy because I'm such a fan of things that I can binge and subjects that I like to learn about. So yeah, I'm still doing that. I do maybe 9 or 10 episodes per season on the actual subject itself. And then I like to piecemeal it out and intersperse interviews with varying experts and experiencers of the paranormal in between. So they tend to be, they're getting longer. The seasons are getting much longer. Yeah. Started out maybe 2 or 3 months for the first season. And now I think I'm going on month 5 now for this one. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
The problem is when you have interesting topics and interesting guests is you try to do, I speak from my perspective, but I'm sure it's the same for you. You try and get as much information as possible into a show. And then sometimes you sit back and after the show, you think, God, that was 2 hours long. And you really worry, well, I do, about putting a show up 2 hours long because you don't want people to think, well, I can't listen to all this. And then you think, well, what do? Do I chop it up? Do I make lots of mini episodes, which sometimes is a good thing if you run into that? Because some of your episodes are kind of pretty much deep dive. I mean, you did a one on, I think it was exorcism. And it's that must have been quite difficult to put together, something like that. There's a lot of research there.
Yeah, there's a ton of research, and when I do run into that problem, I find I have to chop it up into, I don't think I've done 3-part yet, but, it's coming at some point because some of these subjects are just so, you have to go so in depth and explore all those different areas and aspects of just the thing you're talking about that day. And it goes, some of these rabbit holes, they go very, very deep, and you just can't get it in a 30-minute, 45-minute episode.
So what would you say, since we last spoke, what would you say was your favorite episode so far that you've sort of done out of the new content you've produced this year?
I I got a lot of feedback for this one, but I personally, I really enjoyed it. I liked the ectoplasm episode quite a bit. I wasn't expecting to like it that much, but it was just so interesting and so embarrassing, but in a fun way to just watch the physical mediums of the time. It was the height of the spiritualism movement. Everybody was producing ectoplasm all of a sudden, and that was the thing. And that was just, it was a subject. It was cool because it was a subject going in. In my mind, I thought, well, there's not going to be that much here, and there's not going to be all these like twists and turns and love triangles and all of that. And I'll get to the end of it and move on. But it was it was very eye opening. It was a lot more in depth than I thought it was going to go. And people who have listened to that episode, they're going to know what I'm talking about. It turned into a bit of a drinking game because I kept having to talk about something in that particular episode that was very unexpected, about the female anatomy and where ectoplasm is produced from.
Yeah. See, this is an interesting topic that you've touched, because I did quite a lot of reading on the spiritualist with movement, from the 18th century, the early days where you would go to a night out. Now we go clubbing, and those days you go to a séance. You'd see lady whatever her name was, and she was maybe a medium, and she was could materialize spirits. And you would go into a room and buy a ticket and sit around a table, and you're like, I'm going to see something. This is going to be great. And what, you turned all the lights out? Why have you No, it's got to be done in the dark. We can only have a tiny little red light. Oh, that's all right. I can still see stuff. And where's the medium going to be? She's going to be in that box, and we're going to put a curtain across her.
Yeah.
Well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
How do we know? Well, just trust me. How do we know what's, okay, I'm being a bit silly here, but the fact is that when you look at it from our modern day perspective, and you say, okay, well, there was things going on. I was in the room, and there were trumpets on the table, and I could hear them being played, and I heard them go around my head, and I could hear a stick tapping on the table. What did you see? I couldn't see anything because we had to have our eyes closed, and it was in the dark. So
it seems silly, doesn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
It seems like something that the Three Stooges would do, but I mean, I would have loved to get in a time machine and go back to those days and to experience something like that, because I don't believe, for one moment, I don't believe that they were all fakers and frauds. Yeah, I certainly don't believe that for 1 minute. I do think that there were people back then that had some form of ability, whatever that might be, but there were fakers and frauds back then because it was very lucrative to get into that stuff, because there were a lot of people, we're talking, the end of a world war, sons and fathers and whatever have been lost, they never came back. And, the whole photography thing, photographers got into it and like, come into our studio. We can put your son on the picture. We can materialize him. No, you're just doing a double exposure. It sounds horrible, right? It sounds horrible now, and it sounds funny when like we're taking the mick. But when you look at it in modern day times, and then you look back, I understand in a way if somebody goes and has something like that done, it is comforting to have a picture like that. It's comforting. But, like anything, there's always going to be unscrupulous people. But for one moment, I do think that back then in the spiritualist days, there was a real core of proper paranormal stuff going on. But unfortunately, it kind of gets a little bit smothered, Oh, yeah. No, you know what? I agree with you. Of course, any time in history that there's been a phenomenon like this, there's always been that section of people who are they're predators. They're preying on people's beliefs and need for this hope, because you're right, it was there was the war, and people had lost so much, and it was very depressed and dark time for a lot of people, and they needed that hope. And there were those people, quite like the Fox sisters, who saw an opportunity to make money and prey on unsuspecting people. And on the flip side of that, people
people do kind of want to be tricked to some extent too. They want to believe so much that they're willing to sit in a dark room and just believe that the medium inside the box that you can't see and all of this is real. So there is that aspect to it, but it is something that I struggle with coming up here to the end of the season.
Yeah.
Is this idea of like you, I think there is something there. I think there is an ability. I think people have had this capability of doing this for real. And then there's this other side of it, with the unscrupulous behavior and the hoaxing and the fraudulence. And the question in my mind is like, even if there is good to be had here and experienced by people and hope to be given, how much harm is this other side of it doing too? So it's something that I struggle with a bit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the mediums, where it's direct voice mediumship or whatever it is. I mean, there's definitely a lot of stuff that went on back then that had people, proper scientists witness it and say, this really happened and we can't explain it. But there are also, people that have been a bit unscrupulous and tried to get away with stuff and, all the manner of tricks and stuff just to make people part with their money. And, that's, I say that's the nature. It still goes on today. It's gone through the ages. You're going to get that, 50-50. But, it still intrigues me, that whole era of the spiritualist movement. There was something about it. I mean, it kind of captured something, and it was a movement that anybody could be part of, and you could come on board and you could get involved, and even if it just made you feel good, comforting, that sort of thing, then that's it's a positive thing. But I mean, there was that negative as well, but unfortunately, as we said, it's the same with a lot of things these days. And back then, people don't change, do they? You got your bits everywhere. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on from spiritualism, I as I said earlier, been giving some of your episodes a listen, and one episode kind of stood out. I went, aha, this episode is relevant. I find much relevance to this episode, and that is the Stargate episode that you did. You got some feedback. You got some quite good feedback on that, didn't you?
I did. Yes, surprisingly. I was not expecting it, but a lot of people are, I don't know if you knew this, Reeves, a lot of people are interested in this subject of remote viewing and Stargate and SRI. Yes. My goodness. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And you know what? I loved it too. At the end of it, it ended up being quite long, so I chopped it up into two parts to it. But it's a fascinating look at this phenomenon. I feel like if somebody is on the fence about the psychic phenomenon in general, look at what we're doing at SRI and these scientific protocols that were being taken and these trials and experiments. It's mind-blowing what they were able to accomplish.
Did you ever get the opportunity to read the papers that were published on the Black Vault website from the remote viewing of a particular place back in the day when we had all this kind of Stargate and they were doing remote viewing? And there was a document that was released, and it looks pretty official to me. And it was of individuals that were asked to basically given envelopes, and they said, "You want you to view these coordinates. You want to give us your impression of these coordinates." And of course, they're narrating. I can see like a lot, a vast area. I can see people. They're a lot taller than what we are. There seems to be a lot of sadness in the air. I'm in a very tall building. It's made of stone. It's very dark. It's kind of like very sort of a parched area. There's a lot of sand. And then, at the end of it, after they'd done their review, they're like, where are we reviewing anyway? Well, that's a location on Mars.
Oh,
so
well, I did not see those papers. No,
I'll send them to you.
I think that would have stuck out.
Yeah, I'll send you the papers there. I've got a copy of them. It's an interesting read. Now, some people have said, "Oh, it's all a lot of fake nonsense," but there's a lot of stories out there that from we talk about the Stargate project, and people say, "Oh, there's a Stargate in Iraq, isn't there? There's one in Iraq. There's one over." There's lots of these. I'm going to call them not myths, but people have talked about them for a long time, and there's lots of other projects that have come along the way that people have talked about, and we'll touch a few of those as well, because they are pretty fascinating. It's what I kind of got into the scene with. I mean, I go back to the early 1990s, where this kind of stuff that you've just did an episode on was absolutely massive. It was huge. Everyone was talking about stargates. Everyone was talking about being able to places that you could go into, to different planets and stuff. And everyone was a time traveler, because you had the John Titor, remember him? And you had him posting in the forums saying that he was from the future and that he'd come back in time to get a piece of an old computer, because in the future there's no modern technology. They're using old technology because there's been a war, and they're just trying to rebuild civilization. And they've got the ability to have these mobile teleport units, which he's come back with, and that he's a soldier. Fascinating stuff. It might have been a load of old nonsense, but it would have made a great film. I mean, he just popped up. This guy popped up in a forum, and the thing was that people were asking him questions which were based on on mathematics and stuff, and he was answering it, and he was giving proper answers. So even though you could go out and look for the answers and find the answers, it was written in such a way where it was a matter of fact, like he already knew the answers. Some of the stuff he talked about didn't really ring 100% true. He did say some stuff about our future that didn't really ring true. It never came true.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. Yeah. If he had said, yeah, this thing happened and then we saw it happen like that, I wonder.
But there was another answer for that. He said that I can't quote him for word, but he did mention that some of the things might not come true because of the way that we're going, we might not enter that timeline.
Oh.
We might not split off into that timeline for those events to actually manifest. If we do certain things, we'll stay on a certain track. And fascinating. And of course, after a while, he just disappeared after a bunch of posts. But what I was going to say was, back then, in those days, there was lots of stuff going on. And we had, the Stargate stuff, and the people were talking about that. And of course, the crop circles were big and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
I'm gonna just wonder if you've heard of any of these. So, are you familiar with Project Pegasus?
I am not.
Right. So, Project Pegasus, right? And people out there will mostly get, well, not all, but some people listening to this are going, "Oh, shut up!" Here we go, here we go. Story time. Jack and Ori.
Okay.
So, I always mess up this chap's name, but it's Andrew DeBasigo. That's the best I can do. Sorry if I've murdered it, but that's the best I can do. He is kind of like the front runner of this Project Pegasus. He is someone that was in the limelight well, he still is in the limelight, but people were talking about him big time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, because he said something that was so bizarre that you would think, clearly this guy is just having a laugh. So he was apparently taken by the military complex at a young age because he'd shown that he had quite strong psychic abilities. Now, are you familiar with the indigo child phenomenon?
I'm aware of it. Yeah,
Okay.
Not super familiar, but yeah, I know what it is.
Right. So apparently he's in that kind of ilk. He's sort of, I don't know exactly all the ins and outs, but I know that he's been said that he's got some sort of ability or something like that. Anyway, he was taken on. Now let's pretend all this is real. Let's just tell it like it is. I don't know. I wasn't there, so I'm just relaying it as stuff I've read and researched. So he was taken on, and they went into this secret organization, and he had these abilities. And they thought, this guy's, we're going to bring him, we're going to train him, we're going to bring him up. And as a young man, we're going to send him on missions. And what kind of missions would he go on? Well, apparently he was going to go on missions to different planets different places. That was his job. And apparently one of them, I'm going to keep all this really kind of, for the sake of the podcast, and we don't go on and on. There's plenty of information out there if you want to just do a bit of Googling. But basically, he went to Mars. And they had this, allegedly, the government, this is the American government, they have this device, and it's known as a jump room. And he likened it to what you would call an elevator. We call a lift. And you go into this box, the doors close, you feel a bit weird for a few moments, a bit like disorientated, a bit dizzy, like you've got up a bit too quick. The doors open, and you are where you are. And apparently he went to Mars using this device. I don't know if he went more than once, but he does talk about he went to Mars. And when he was on Mars, I don't know whether he met them when they were on Mars or he went to Mars with them, but apparently on this same team of people that were doing these these missions, or whatever you want to call them, was someone that we all know, and that is one of America's presidents, which is Barack Obama. When he wasn't a president, he was a teenage boy, and what was it, Barry Salugo or whatever? I can't remember.
Barry. I can't remember. Yeah.
But anyway, Barry. Let's call him Barry because that's what his name was back then. He wasn't Obama then; he was Barry. So allegedly, once again, I got to get that in there because I'm not talking fact here. I'm allegedly. So, but let's pretend all this really did happen. So, he saw Obama on a Mars, and he said, it was a rocky place, and he was able to breathe. And there were creatures on Mars, and these creatures looked like they were made of rocks, and they chased them, and they had to run back to their device, the
jump room,
and come back to Earth.
Wow!
Bizarre.
Wow! So he was chased off of Mars by rock creatures.
Get off my land. Get off my rocks.
get out of my
planet.
yard. Yeah, with Barack Obama. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Now apparently, so this apparently happened. This is back in we're going back to like 1980s. He talks about this. This is around the 1980s, and you know that in the 1980s anything was possible.
It sure was.
So we had Battlestar Galactica, we had Miami Vice. Anything was possible. So moving on a little bit, another one of my favorite time travel, places, things, is a little bit more convoluted because there's more than one person involved with it. And some of these people I'm going to mention, you might not know who they are. You might know who they are. So, but there are people listening that are going to go, oh, I know these people. I've seen all their videos. It's great. So,
I'm curious.
Okay,
go ahead.
So, I just want to mention these people a minute, and then we'll talk about what they were involved in. So, Al Bielbick, Peter Moon, Duncan Cameron, and Preston Nichols. Now, these people, most people listening, I haven't got a clue. I've no idea who that is. You could have been anyone. Well, there's a crossover here. Some of these people allegedly were involved with the Philadelphia experiment. The ship that allegedly did a little bit of time traveling, or it went invisible. And also the Montauk project. Now, are you familiar with the Montauk project?
I'm not familiar with the Montauk project, no.
So, I'm going to be really simplify everything here because if we go a deep dive, we're going to be here forever. So, the Montauk project is in Montauk, Camp Hero. It's a base, an army base, and it's just outside of, I think, Camp Hero. It's just outside of New York, I think. So it's still there. It's still a place. You can go there. It was a base, and apparently it was a base within a base. There was a secret thing going on there. They were experimenting with, allegedly, time travel. And the way they were doing it is they were using young boys who had good psychic ability. One of these individuals was a Duncan Cameron, sadly passed away now. He was a young boy. He was taken, and they had what was called the chair. Now, the chair was able to project you forward. I think it was forward or backward in time, but I'm pretty sure it was forward in time. You would be connected up to all these electrodes and all this stuff, and then it would project I think it projected your consciousness forward in time. And Preston Nichols wrote a book on this, about how he was involved with the project, and he was like into electronics and stuff like that. He was a bit of a whiz with stuff like that. A lot of people gave him a bad rap, right? And I must say that some of the stuff, Preston Nichols is no longer with us, but he's a bit of a quirky guy. All right, if you watch some of his early videos, you think, oh, he comes across as a bit mental, but I'm not. He's a bit knowledgeable about stuff. He knew a lot about sound, about frequency, and he had some interesting theories. And unfortunately, back in the day, right, all you had was a VHS video camera. And I'm talking about internet version 1.0, where anybody could be anyone, and all you needed was a video camera and get it on the internet, and you were a superstar. There was no YouTube. There was none of that. You just had these little websites, and that's where, and forums mainly, and that's mainly where, like, I'm trying to think of the name. There was a paranormal, sci-fi paranormal forum, and that's where I first learnt about Preston Nichols, the Montauk Project, Duncan Cameron, those kind of people, and that kind of stuff. And I started to get into it and watch these videos, and I fell down this rabbit hole. And he tells the story of how they were all involved with this project. But if we go back a bit further, that Duncan Cameron, who at the time was a young man, I would say late 30s, maybe early 40s, he and Al, who was a young man back in the days of the Philadelphia experiment, somehow they were on this ship, and it went back in time to many, many years in the past, and it rematerialized in the past. They were then projected somehow. Somehow they got stuck in that timeline, and then they got back into the future. It's a mind-splitting story.
Yeah. That was with the Philadelphia experiment. Is that?
Yeah. The Philadelphia.
I hear you right. Okay.
But apparently, this technology that they were using to render this ship invisible, and we know that there was some experimentation going on back in those days to make military objects invisible to radar, and by using electromagnification and all that stuff, and to make it disappear basically so it couldn't be seen on radar. But apparently something went wrong, and the ship dematerialized, and all of the crew basically were either welded into the decks and welded into the ship, because it basically disappeared, and wherever they were, when it rematerialized, you were stuck in a wall or whatever. And anyone that didn't, was lucky enough to not be stuck on the ship, went insane, went mental, lost their minds. So you don't really know what to believe, but there is always what I always say is, when we have stories like this, somewhere there's a little grain of truth. Somewhere,
I believe that. Yeah,
there's a little grain of truth, and from small acorns and all that, and you think, I've got to find that little grain of truth so that I can then go back and find out what possibly this real story was. I find these stories, I mean, there are some things in the stories, and quite rightly so. Some of it's quite laughable, but when you sort of tear it down, for example, there was with Montauk, okay, this is what they were doing. They were taking these young boys. Sometimes they were being used against their will, okay, basically being kept prisoner in this base, and they were being put in these chairs, and their energies, their psychic abilities, their psychic energies were being used so that they could manifest and be able to travel in time or whatever. and
Right.
something went wrong, and the chair overloaded, and it was basically opened a portal. And there is this very famous picture out there, and it's of the fields around Montauk by the base, and you can see what looks like, it's a very low quality picture, but still a very talked about picture. Apparently this portal opened, and everything went haywire. They couldn't shut it down, and this giant Sasquatch-like creature walked through the portal.
Holy what?
And then walked off across the fields, out of the base across the fields, and the only way that they could shut this portal down was to cut the main electricity feed to the dish, which was in some way helping generate this kind of thing. So
Okay.
that happened.
Whoa, you just blew my mind. That was a twist I wasn't expecting, because I don't, like I said, I don't know anything about
Well,
this.
what did you do at work today? Well, I went to work and we had an overload, and the chair fell over, and then this giant Sasquatch came out and walked out of the building and walked across the fields, and then we had to basically smash up the generator to make it stop. That's
Dude,
what I did today.
How was your day, honey?
What's for dinner? What's for tea?
Wow.
So yeah, all right, okay. There's a lot of stuff out there when we talk about bases and time travel. That might be a lot of old, someone's made a story up and somebody's taken it and run with it. And forums are a great place to lay seeds. And you need to put down an idea, and then everyone else will create a story around it. And that's true. That's true for anything.
Sure.
But
yeah.
some of these stories, I mean, Mars, for example, Mars. We look at Mars now, and there's a lot of research going on with Mars saying, there's a possibility that there might have been a civilization on Mars a long time ago, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago. But we look at all these pictures on Mars, and people are starting to, more people are going, hang on a minute, what's that? What's that?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me think, well, is there someone in NASA that's letting these pictures slip through the net, or not just photoshopping everything, thinking we have to get the message out somehow, but we don't want to do it in, well, there you go, there's a housing estate there, sorry, do you know what I mean?
Oops. Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you,
I've seen some of those photos. I think you shared one with me that
Yeah.
was very intriguing. I mean, how can you deny I'm looking at this thing? I'm looking at a picture, unless they're all Photoshop, but I
Yeah.
just don't think that's the case.
I have, when it comes to things like Mars, I have kind of a little bit of a skeptical and a little bit of an open mind to it. And I've always Mars has always fascinated me. Maybe because it's our, what we call it. I mean, the moon is our closest neighbor, but the closest planet is Mars. And I think that when you think of Mars, you think, well, maybe, just maybe there was a thriving civilization there long before we were little amoebas in in the soup of life. We were just that, and there was this civilization there, and something happened, a massive calamity happened, and maybe parts of their planet came to us, and there was the right bacteria on those comets or whatever, and plopped into the soup, and we are their ancestors in a way. Or we look at stuff, I mean, for example, if you go back 10 years, the governments would say, UFOs, there's no such thing. It's swamp gas. It's nothing. We don't research that stuff. And now we've got the governments of the world saying, well, yeah, there is something, and we're going to rename it. We're going to change it from UFOs to UAPs because it's more palatable, and and that way we can change it and make it like, well, we're not denying UFOs because that's never existed, but these UAPs, yeah, these are definitely, do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's
right. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's like they did it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Did they do it ahead of time because they know that ultimately, it is going to be revealed, or there is something there, and they kind of want to soften the path a little bit leading up to it. It can't be a UFO.
No.
God forbid. It cannot be that. But
no, because they've denied that for 50 years, 70 years or whatever. They've denied that. They've denied that UFOs exist for all those years. they've denied since Roswell. Although, let's be honest, UFOs were being seen a long time before the Roswell case. You've got accounts of ancient Rome, people seeing stuff. You've got accounts of ancient Europe and people seeing stuff, and even goes back to the Bible where they talk of stuff in the sky. So it's ludicrous to think that Roswell was the beginning of the UFOs, but in the minds of the general public, Roswell was beginning of the flying saucer era. And so the government is saying, no, we're not denying that because that never existed. But what we are admitting to is these UAPs. That's something different. No, it's not. It's the same thing. You're just changing the name.
You know what? It got to a certain point where they couldn't deny that there's something up there in the sky. People are seeing it. We're videotaping it. The military is videotaping it and releasing it. And they don't know what it is either, but there's something there. And we know it's not us, and we know it's not, somebody else, another country. So it just got to a point where they couldn't deny it anymore. So I understand the way that these blocks are being laid down now, why they're talking about these UAPs and having these congressional hearings and all of that. I get it.
So, coming around to UFOs and stuff, and stepping back into the realm of Stargates, where do you think they may have come from? Who do you think gave the technology for even a Stargate to be a thing?
A Stargate. So, this is going to be an interesting, I might waffle a little bit, because the Stargate project, that while they might have gone there and that had to do with remote viewing, like being able to go to places like Mars and Ingo Swann seeing rings around Jupiter and go back and forth in time as well. I didn't really do any specific study on the concept of Stargates themselves. So just to clarify, that's it's a portal, correct?
Yeah.
In basic terms. Is it just too easy to say? Yes, I think it's ultra intelligent life that has given us this, or a future civilization, something like that. Is that kind of ducking out of that answer?
I think a lot of our past and a lot of prehistory, going back to beyond the Egyptians and the Mayans and all that. I think that the history that was sold is a very let me find the right word, because I don't want to sound like I'm being horrible, but I think the history that we're being sold and being told, and it's being put in the books that our children read, is a history that is narratively constructed in a way that makes it palatable for the powers that be, to keep us from not really asking too many questions. So, for example, if you go back to ancient Egypt and you look at the pyramids and you look at the Sphinx, we know that the Sphinx and the pyramids were built at different times, because you can look at the Sphinx, and some people like Hancock and his research on ancient Egypt and ancient peoples. And when you look at the Sphinx and you can see, watermarks where there was an ocean, and that was at some point in the sea. There was there was water around it, and that's what it made erosion on it. And so, and other people say, no, that's not what happened. That was just wear and tear. That's just the sand and the wind and all that stuff. And you look at the pyramids, and you look at the earlier pyramids, where they look a bit crap. They're like they've made it, and they're like, nah, that's not that good. Let's just bury that. Just forget that one. Start again. That's a bit. You can't put him in there. That's horrible. So and then they suddenly jump to these amazing pyramids. Right. That dominate. I mean, if this just dominate the scene, that you look and you see these huge structures and you think, wow. Those people that built that, and you look at the quality of the workmanship. You go back, all those years. You look at some of the ancient things that were built on this planet, and you look at the ruins, and you look at the precision that they were made. You know, some of the precision of the blocks that you can't even get a cigarette paper between them, and you think those are cut with such amazing precision. We can't do that today. You know, even with the technology we got, we could most probably do it, but we'd have to take us a bleeding long time to figure it out and stuff. And these people seem to be like, no sweat, we can do that. Give me a chisel and a hammer, and I'll just knock that out for you in an afternoon.
That's so interesting. Like, it was distinctly different from its preceding versions. Like, if we're looking at the Sphinx or the pyramids, distinctly different. The craftsmanship, the precision, and even in our modern times, we look back and don't really understand how that took place. How did they do it? Like, what was the method?
So I'm not saying they didn't do it. I mean, I'm not saying that they all had like, Black and Deckers and stuff. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that where did they get the knowledge from? Where did they get the technology from? Was there someone else on this planet saying, don't do it like that, do it like this, do it this way? And were there, I mean, because there are legends. There are legends that there were these people around that were coming out into civilization and showing people the way and showing them how to do things a better way. And of course, then you go back to the myth and the legend of Atlantis and the people that lived on Atlantis, because apparently Atlantis was so technology advanced, and they had these great buildings and they came out and they taught people and stuff. So, it's not always aliens, okay? It's not always aliens that came down and taught everyone. Maybe there was something else going on there. But the fact is that when we look at these stories and you look at people saying, well, yeah, we went to Mars, or there was a Stargate in the desert which was dug up and taken away because whatever. And I think to myself, the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what? That might just be true. That might just be true. It might be a lot of cobblers, but it might just be true.
Yeah, that's something that's I got to say is happening to me as well. The older I get and the more that I learn, and my mind is just expanded to the possibilities, the sheer possibilities, the likelihood that everything, our history, how all of this stuff was done is just as it has been laid out for us. The likelihood that is the case continues to go down. It just goes down further and further. The possibility that, maybe not aliens, but, some advanced civilization, other intelligence, some kind of input or, influence over us at that time. Like, I feel that is highly possible. Absolutely.
Well, the thing with aliens, we kind of got it in our mindset ever since Whitley Strieber had his experience and the book Communion come out and the film Communion come out. The grey, the face of the grey was not really a thing until that book cover dropped on the shelves and everybody started saying, well, not everyone, but there were people out there that said, hang on a minute, I'm having these experiences, I'm seeing these things.
Right.
So that kind of opened the door there, and I think with this kind of abductions and experiences that people are having, see, if you go back a little bit to sort of the 70s, the 60s and 70s, right? Maybe the 50s as well, but mainly the 60s and 70s, when people had experiences with aliens, they were never the same. Somebody might say, yeah, I was cycling home and I got around a corner and there was this giant lizard robot man and he had a spaceship and he was looking at me and he tried to grab my arm, but I cycled off. So there was that, right? And then somebody else might say, I had an experience and it was a giant jellyfish. Mm-hmm. But now, modern day, everyone says it was grey. It was a little man with big eyes, and he didn't say nothing, but he looked quite angry, and he got hold of my leg. So, and everyone has that. So is it that the phenomenon is like caught on to like, well, we know what we got to look like now? It's the whole kind of cat in an alien, an alien cat. Do aliens, it's like, is a Bigfoot like an alien with a suit on? That paranormal kind of thing. Is the phenomenon that we're experiencing, is it it's not a materialistic phenomenon like we are here. Well, are we here? I don't know. Or are we in a simulation? I don't know. That's another question. But the fact is that is the phenomenon manifesting in a way that we can understand it? Because we cannot perceive it if it were presenting itself in its natural form, because we're not programmed to understand it. We can only interpret things on a certain spectrum of vision, a certain frequency of hearing, a certain we can only see things with what we've got. And if it goes beyond that, we ain't going to see it. We're not going to be aware. Look, an ant, for example, you go to work, right? And you see a little ladybird having a little walk, and he's got some food or whatever, and he's got a leaf, and he's walking back to his house. Well, not a house, but you know what I mean. And he's a little ladybird. He's got no idea, right? He's got no idea what's going on in the Ukraine. He's got no idea that I've got to go to work. He's got no idea that I've got to pay bills. All he knows is he's got a leaf and he's got to get it back to his house. That's all he knows. That's all that's relevant in his world. And if you kind of take that and maximize it by whatever, right? That's us. That ladybird is us. When it comes to aliens, when it comes to other consciousnesses, right?
Right.
Other things, other whatever they are. We say aliens. Immediately you think, oh, they're from another planet. They might not be from another planet. They might already be here. Maybe it's just something we can't perceive. Yeah. Hiding in plain sight, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, just to touch back on what you were saying, it's a theory. I think it's throughout the paranormal field, they think about it this way, but there's something that I've been thinking about are all of these things, because they seem to hinge on the person's perspective, a human's perspective of it. And like you were saying, like with the phenomenon of aliens and UFOs, why did it used to be a jellyfish, or it used to be reptilian, and nowadays it's the gray, it's the humanoid looking whatever gray, and things seem to come in chapters, in waves, and then all of a sudden we see this one thing, like it's the entity of the moment or whatever. Like, is it hinging on us, on our perspective, on our ability to see it and handle it, that whatever the thing is at that moment? Same with other aspects of the paranormal too. Why some people see ghosts or shadow people, or don't, or, see it in a certain way. Why some people only see evil, Yeah, the only way that I can kind of, I've thought about that before with the alien phenomenon and the people experiencing stuff, and obviously, people have experienced stuff. I personally know people that have seen some right wacky stuff, and I think I wouldn't call them a liar, because I know them personally, and I know they wouldn't make something like that. But the fact is that I think that the only difference is that the reason I say that the phenomenon, whatever it is possibly able to interpret our perceptions and our fears, or whatever it might be, is because of one of two things, really. And I mentioned this on another episode a while ago. Is firstly, if we go back to like the 1950s, the 1960s, and you look at what was in pop culture back then. Well, it was Flash Gordon, it was rocket ships to the moon, it was all that kind of stuff, and we were making like dustbin lid alien men, and they were like the robots from space or whatever. So that was in the kind of public consciousness. So if this phenomenon is a phenomenon that presents itself in the way that the public understand, then you're going to see stuff like that. So modern day aliens, modern day, is going to be more like the Whitley Strieber, because Whitley Strieber's interpretation of what he experienced is out there. It's out there everywhere, and everybody thinks of the grey now, and everybody talks about it. That's not to say that everyone has seen or read Whitley Strieber's book that had an experience with a grey. There's people out there that you mostly don't even know who he is, and never seen any of his literature or stuff, but they've had an experience, and it is the same sort of thing. So it doesn't mean to say that you have to have a knowledge of it. It's that it's the phenomenon that is presenting itself to you in that way. Mm-hmm. You are interpreting it how it wants you to interpret. You don't get a choice on what you see. You're being presented because it's got the power of your perception. If, for example, it came in my room and I was so scared, and then all of a sudden I was really happy, and I was happy to see it. It's got some sort of control over your mental facility. Your mental ability to be scared, to run away, to get angry. For example, Travis Walton, when he got abducted, he was on the ship. He woke up. He was on an examination table. He saw these little grey creatures. He thought, "What the is that going on?" He got up. He grabbed what he called a tube, but some sort of thing. He hit one of them, clonked him, fell over. It went out the room. They didn't say anything. They just wanted to get him and put him back on the table. They saw he was getting violent, so they left the room. A few moments later, right, a couple of humanoid people came in and started talking to him, saying, "Look, calm down. It's going to be all right. It's going to be fine." Now, what's going on there? What's he actually seeing? Are they actually people, or is that being projected to him so that he no longer becomes violent?
Right.
So,
right.
that's why I think the phenomenon is changing. It changes to the way that we perceive it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a spaceship in the sky or a little green man or whatever. It's what it wants it to present itself to us. Sometimes it's not even. It's just you touched on ghosts just then, and about the paranormal, and about people having experiences with the paranormal. I think that there's a lot of us out there that have had experiences with the paranormal that didn't even know you had an experience with the paranormal. That you've seen a ghost and never had no idea that you've seen a ghost because it was so real. You might have walked into a house and saw a person that walked past you, and for all you know, that person was a ghost. Yeah.
I wonder, is it if this is the case and is presenting itself in a way that we can perceive it, we don't have a choice in it. It just presents itself in that way. I wonder, is it something, we're just theorizing here, but is it something for our benefit, or is it this totally separate kind of reality going side by side, coinciding with our reality, and they're dipping into our side of things for some reason, presenting themselves to us for some reason. I don't know. Those are the random thoughts I have. I'm like, is it for our benefit that you are changing your appearance, or these things are changing, and I do see it in this way? I wonder.
Well, we could go. I know. We're going off. We're coming to the end of this show episode now, so why not? I'm going to throw the book wide open. Okay, so here's one for you. Maybe that the whole phenomenon of not so much ghosts, because that is a kind of a thing. Although I think it's all connected. All right, when it comes to aliens, UFOs, and the stuff that's going on at the moment, where there's sightings going on, and people are, even the governments are starting to admit we don't know what it is, and it can elude, our technology. It can elude it. It can accelerate away at massive speeds away from our fighter jets. They got no chance. It's like, see ya. Now, what if that phenomenon was a manifestation of our planet, and it's a way that our planet is trying to protect itself because it's now perceiving us as a sickness, that we are now, but since, because let's be honest, this whole phenomenon of the more the planet seems to get polluted, the more that we have these wars and killing and stuff, the more that this phenomenon seems to be prevalent in our skies, and it's now presenting itself up to the point where it's hovering over military ships going, yeah, we're here, what are you going to do? We're in charge, so you need to sort it out. It's more like, what if the planet is now saying, okay, enough is enough. We need to sort this out because you are now becoming a problem. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but you think about, people say that the planet is a living organism. And in a way, it is, in a way it is. And if you think of, so if you think of animals, right, there's a lot of animals out there that have symbiotic relationships with other animals, which in theory, they should eat them, but like little birds, the little birds will come along and then they'll go up to the crocodile. The crocodile will open his mouth and the little bird will go inside and have a peck around and clean his teeth for him. And then he'll go off and then the bird's got a little dinner. He's had some food and the crocodile's got clean teeth. So he ain't going to get toothache. But in reality, what's stopping that crocodile from munching that bird going, oh, that's some more food for me? Because it's a symbiotic relationship. He knows that the bird is going to clean his teeth, or, like fish. When you go under the water, you get the big fish and the little fish come along and they clean all the dead scales off. It's a symbiotic relationship. And unfortunately, we're not being very symbiotic with the planet because we're just going mental and trying to blow each other up. So that maybe the planet has got a consciousness and that what we're seeing in our skies is a product of the planet, in some way.
Oh, wow. It's manifesting in this way. That is an incredible idea. I've never really thought about it that way. I don't know. Just, we got crazy today, but you know what? I love a good theory.
Well, there you go. I think we've I've come to the end of this episode. I always like to leave people on a cliffhanger because there'd always be a part 2 then, won't there? That means you'll have to come back because we'll have to continue this conversation at some point.
Oh, I'm down. I'm there.
Good. So anyway, what have you got planned for Christmas? You got any Christmas podcasts in the mix?
No, I don't. Just because I got out of Halloween and the October speed, I had been thinking for a second maybe do like a radio drama or something, just something fun for Christmas. But I am going to go back to what I used to do before and take a little break. I will be back with the new season 5 in the new year, fresh, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But I'm gonna be taking a break here pretty soon. I got my conclusion episode next week, and then I'm going to take a couple weeks for myself.
Okay, cool. Well, everybody deserves a holiday, so you do put a lot of work into your episodes. I must say that. So a couple weeks. I
try.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyway, all right. So for me, I don't know yet. Christmas time. I think I might do something, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Maybe so. But I'll do something.
I like the ghost stories you've been telling. You can do a whole.
I might do something like that, or I might. I don't know. I had this mad idea the other day to do some sort of paranormal quiz.
Oh, okay.
Who knows? I mean, it's experimenting and see what works. But that'll be at Christmas. I'm going to keep it a secret until then because I just don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, thanks again, Kristen, for joining us. I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation. It went a bit all over the place, but that's the way sometimes these episodes are. And they're quite fun as well to do because we never know where we're going to end up. And until next episode, talk to you soon.